Okay, so I think we are recording. And like I said, I've got a whole series of questions. I don't know how long it will take. And so really and some of them may be out there. They may seem a little strange. And if anything seems a little too strange for you, just let me know.
I
Uh,
love that. Stranger the better.
good, because we've got some strange stuff here for you.
Good.
And so what I've done is I've studied Eastern philosophy, Taoism, Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta. I've kind of went across all of these over the last 30 years. And so what I'm going to do is I've put them in kind of an amalgam of different authors like Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, some of the more contemporary teachers from the East. And I put the questions that I would imagine that they might put to a neuroscientist. And so we can kind of look at this as, Western culture and Eastern philosophy. And, and you're going to see a lot of these questions. I think when we were talking last time, one of the things that really stuck out for me was the idea of not just talking about brain modules, but this idea of the brain huddle and this idea of relationships. And so a lot of these questions, they may sound very similar, but because that seems like the path I'm on now. It's like it's all relational. How do these brain modules, how do they get along? And so, okay. So first question.
Yeah.
So the mindfulness movement, really popular here in the West. I even teach a class on mindfulness. And so the idea that you can go to a university and take a class on mindfulness shows kind of an interesting progress, I guess you could say. And that traces back to Zen and just being doing what you're doing rather than being distracted. And there's been so much interesting work on that default mode network that we really can't just sit still. So if we sit still, the mind wanders and we get distracted like we were just talking about. And there's a really interesting paper that shows that when we get distracted, that actually causally may lead to unhappiness. And so the whole mindfulness movement is how happy you get by doing what you're doing. And that is, of course, the whole trip of Zen Buddhism. Do what you do, be where you're at, and be in the moment. So when we get to the right side and the left side of the brain, and we start talking about these characters in the right side and characters in the left, what is it about the characters of the right that seem to be in the moment, that they seem to be doing what they're doing, focused on the task? And what is it about the left characters that seem to be so distractible and so easily pulled into the future or the past?
So two major differences between the right brain and the left brain that are making that difference. First of all, would you give us a very brief definition of mindfulness?
My favorite definition of mindfulness, I think it's one of the more popular ones, is purposely being present in this moment without judgment. And so there's a couple of interesting elements there. There's a little bit of effort because you're purposely paying attention to whatever you're doing at this moment, and you're doing it in a very non-judgmental way.
Okay. So I love that. And first of all, being in the present moment is where the right brain exists. The left brain is biologically designed to take information about the present and compare it to the past and project it into the future. So biologically speaking, it is somewhere other than right here, right now. So just the mere fact that we have to have a mindfulness class or a mindfulness movement or even learn the term mindfulness is because the left brain is designed to be some other time than now. The other biggest difference is the left brain is about me. It's all about me. The whole world revolves about me. I, Jill Bolte Taylor, I am filtered into every piece of information coming in about the present and then about my past and my projection into the future. So I, as an individual, I exist in the left brain, and I exist generally in some other time other than right here, right now. Well, that's a fantastic tool. Isn't it lovely that I have an individual and that I can use this mass I define as me, separate from the big old right brain, which doesn't perceive me an individual at all. So to the right brain, I am not separate from the present moment. I exist in the present moment. And the present moment isn't about me. It's about everything connected. And so that's why it becomes about the we. But a we is not a you and a me. It is an us. We are the ocean. It's not like I'm a drop in the ocean. No, as soon as I go back to being the ocean, I become the ocean. So there's these two very different pieces of focus between these two hemispheres. And as soon as I take me, if mindfulness, me, now I have a mind, I have to purposefully bring my mind to me, my mind to the present moment. And it's not about my future or my past. It's just about what is. It's raining outside. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with me until I say, well, I'm not happy that it's raining outside because I can't do what I want to do.
So how do we reconcile this? How do we spend some time in the present moment? And it's useful, as you said, it's a very useful tool to be able to project into the future and reevaluate the past. And even having an I is a very useful thing. But how do we balance this out so the I doesn't take over, and we get some time when, maybe most of the time, when we're actually living in the present moment, because that seems to be connected to our overall happiness. And how do we know when to pull out the I, pull out the time, pull out the future?
I think that, okay, so now I'm going to go a layer deeper. And so now I have these two hemispheres. They have these cells, they process information in different ways. But because they process information in different ways, they value different things. So it's really going to then boil down to, well, what does the right brain value? Well, if the right brain doesn't have a me, an individual, and it's about the we collective whole, then it's going to value our performance, our using ourselves as individuals, using that left brain in order to support in ways that will support the collective whole. So I'm going to care. The right brain cares about our relationship with the planet, because we know very well if we don't have a healthy planet and a relationship with that is healthy, the planet's going to be gone and we're going to be gone. So it really becomes about the we. So the value of the right brain is about the collective whole, and it's open and expansive, and it's not hooked on what was, because it doesn't have a what was. It's looking at what is and how do we always proceed from here. So if you look at it, it's like every moment is a resurrection. Every moment is a new possibility for a whole new way of being. And then we have the programming in the left brain that then we can use me, the individual, and all of my networks and all of my this and all of my this, that, and all of my money and all of my friends and all of my power and all of my knowledge, and use that toward this overall we value. Where the left brain doesn't have that we value. The left brain's about the me. How much money is in my bank account? How big is my house compared to your house? I want more. It's always climbing this ladder of hierarchy, wanting to get higher and always wanting more, so that the values are fundamentally different, and we act in the world based on the value. So to me, just the mere concept that we are aware of mindfulness is fantastic, because mindfulness brings us into the present moment, which means, oh, I can actually think about what I'm thinking. All right, if I'm thinking about what I'm thinking and I have an internal world that is vast and open compared to just my external world, then I can make myself aware that I have all of these different tools. I have these two very different ways of being in the world. How do I create a healthy relationship? And the healthiest relationship is ultimately going to be the we, because without the we, me doesn't matter anymore. Eventually, we're going to explode the world. So how do we find this balance? And as you look at the brain, they're pretty well balanced. I mean, you'll look neuroanatomically, and there's a this on one side and a that on the other side, and they're communicating, and they're making decisions which of these groups of cells is going to be dominant in any moment. And there are all these different groups of cells that are making that negotiation. To be able to choose, how do I want to be? What will lower my stress circuitry of my left brain so that I stop worrying, or I cool my anxiety, or I just feel better about the future, and I forgive my past and I let that go so that I can actually be free in the present moment to live life today. Everybody, that's the personal challenge of all of us.
It's really in the left brain's best interest to actually, particularly in the long run, to adopt a lot of right brain strategies, because like you said, if we destroy the planet, then that self has no place to live.
It's kind of like a virus. You know, we're all thinking virus, right? And a healthy virus, a smart virus. This is the thing about Omicron. Omicron is a really smart version of the virus. If a virus comes in and takes over a host and kills the host, it just killed its host. It killed its manufacturing plant and everybody who was inside. And so that's not what a virus wants to do. A virus wants to figure out, how do I become extremely contagious without killing the host, just taking over the host and then spreading everywhere. So we're kind of the same way. If we use our left brain to destroy ourselves, well, that was the end of us. How did that serve us? In the big picture, not very well.
Interesting. Okay, great. And the second question I got for you, and it just stood out, it's such a contrast between Eastern philosophy and Western culture, is that so many of the teachers of non-duality, Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta, when they talk about of course, they were not neuroscientists, but they had a very intuitive understanding of the monkey mind and the voice in the head and how troublemaking it is. And their approach was actually very interesting, because they would quote over and over again, they would say something like, just ignore it. Ignore the voice in the head. It's not who you are, so why do you care if it's bouncing off the walls? So their approach was really ignoring the processing of the left brain. And in that sense, by ignoring it, maybe that was one technique to help calm it down. But I'm just curious what your take is on that, because it's not very relational to just say, I'm just going to ignore you. So so that approach was mostly having the right brain just ignore the left brain, and maybe it'll go away. But your approach seems to be a little bit more, again, relational. So are there ideas or strategies we could do, and like maybe not ignoring the voice in the head, or particularly when it gets problematic, maybe character 2, when it really acts up? One approach is that we could ignore it, but it seems that your strategy is more of a relational one, where we kind of get to work things out, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at it, first of all, neuroanatomically. The brain is made up of these cells. Every thought we have, every emotion we have, every physiological experience we have is based on cells inside of the brain. Cut out the brain cells, the circuit for anger, and I simply can't feel anger anymore. So it's all about the cells. Bottom line, the root of the whatever is the cells. And the more often we run a collection of cells in a loop, the stronger that loop becomes. And then it begins to run on automatic, and it becomes habitual thinking, habitual emotions, or physiologically habitual, like stress. So to me, that is helpful. Simply knowing that whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm feeling, whatever physiologically is rushing through me right now, it is a group of cells. And as soon as I remember, these are cells in my brain. Some of them I prefer to run more often than others. Some prefer to run more often than I would like for them to run. But it's a group of cells. And as soon as I observe, instead of just become and run on automatic all these cells, then I'm a step away from the relooping of these systems. So from the moment I think a thought, stimulates an emotion, stimulates a physiological response like noradrenaline, dumps into my blood, flushes through me, flushes out of me, is less than 90 seconds. Well, from a physiological, anatomical perspective, that means any emotion, you trigger me being angry and I can feel it perk up, I can feel the trigger, I can feel it blow. I make decisions during that 90 seconds about, do I yell at you? Do I take a walk? Do I hit the wall? Do I hit you? Do I grab a gun and shoot you? Whatever it is, we have this 90-second cycle. So just knowing that allows me then to sit back and say, this person, every time my so-and-so comes into the room, they just poke me like they're poking the bear and I just want to, and it's like, look at your watch and watch how that feeling, that experience will dissipate inside of that 90 seconds. So I think looking at the brain and recognizing how do cells in networks and circuits function is helpful. But then if you've got the monkey mind, and the monkey mind might be the verbiage of your character one, which is busy rationalizing and organizing thoughts, or it's that emotion, which is not rational, but it is about me and it's protecting me, and it can get pretty loud and mean and ugly, or it can hide, it can get scared, it can do everything that we know that it does. It's circuitry. And that circuitry specifically has been designed to save my life. If I just want to sit on a mountain and meditate and I want to let my monkey mind just do its thing, well, my monkey mind might be in the background going, okay, stay alert. Those smells that I'm smelling, have I ever smelled that before? Is that a lion in the background? There's this movement over here. Do I need to look over there and make sure that I'm not going to be eaten? The brain was designed to save our life. And so these cells, they didn't just go away because we're not living out on the prairie anymore. They're still inside of our brain, still looking for danger. So many people will say, quiet your left brain, quiet your left brain. And I view cells like the whole brain is filled with just thousands and thousands of little children. And if you've got a little child who keeps pulling on your pants and going, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. At some point, you're going to put your little hand down there and you're going to calm that little child. You don't want the child to act out, but you also want to soothe that circuitry. So as you look at the whole brain, we are electrical, chemical beings, and we are in a vibrational existence, electromagnetic radiation in us, among us, about us, around us. We're fueling it with all the electronics in the world, all of that. Bzz, we're all in a buzz. And it's a matter of, okay, well, how do I take that, which can dysregulate the flow of my circuitry that I feel my mindfulness and my peacefulness in? How do I re-regulate that so that I truly feel calm? Not so that I'm trying to do this over here. I'm trying to be mindful up on a mountaintop, and which might be at my desk or wherever, when I've got this anxiety going on to me. Well, if I take the part of me that is neuroregulated in peacefulness, and I come in and I purposely, energetically hold the dysregulated portion of my brain, it can calm itself down. So that's how I look at it through both the neuroanatomical. But as you say, this becomes relational. How do I use my own brain to regulate parts of my emotional system when they are in the alarm, alert, I have to save myself, if I can see that in this moment I'm actually safe? How do I purposefully, mindfully use other cells in my brain to re-regulate myself back to peacefulness? And in the process, the monkey mind, or the verbiage will not be ignored, but it will be purposefully soothed.
Yeah, I like so much of that, because I started thinking about the Eightfold Path, and a lot of people, they look at the Buddha in different ways. I always look at the Buddha's teaching as really the first psychology, that we had as human beings. And he talked about this eightfold path. And the first part of the eightfold path was right perspective or right view. And it seemed like the way you were putting it, the right view is to understand that this is all brain circuitry. And then it kind of puts everything on equal ground. So there's no emotion that really has any privilege over any other conscious state. It's all brain, it's all neurons.
Right.
And so that kind of gives everyone a level playing field when it comes to every experience I have in my life.
Exactly. And we all have all four. So it's not like you're better than me because you have better control over your anger or your rage or your hostility or your sadness, your character too. It's not a competition. The left brain wants it all to be a competition because that's how it climbs that ladder. And I want to be better than you because it's me versus you. But to the right brain, I just want to live a peaceful, productive, meaningful life. And how do I do that? And the best way for me to do that is to bring myself out of the me, the individual left brain, go into the values of my right brain, recognize I have this magnificent tool that is cells in circuit. And how do I use my rage? For example, before I had a stroke, I had a higher level of anger. And that was because I was constantly fighting for my life. I had a very traumatic relationship with one of my brothers growing up. And so this anger I turned into advocacy for the mentally ill because he ended up being mentally ill and I ended up being a neuroscientist. But I used it to propel and to promote what I truly believed in the bigger picture of my right brain, which is these people, we don't understand severe mental illness, and we need to cut them some slack and try to stop making all the negative judgment against mental illness and recognize these are cells. We need to understand the cells. We need to put money through the government into research that's going to truly help us understand at a cellular level what's happening with these people. But it allowed me to have my own righteous platform at the same time. So pre-stroke, I was very, very much like that. Post-stroke, everything changed.
There's an old Zen story about someone who had an anger problem, and he went to the teacher and he said, I have an anger problem. And the teacher said, well, show me your anger. And he had no control over it. He said, it just happens to me. And he said, well, how can it be you if you don't have any control over it? And that kind of put it, so it was a kind of an intuitive sense, almost like the amygdala, like almost that these things are, like you said, they're old programs to help us survive. And so they're kind of autonomous in that sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually beautifully put. How can it be you if you don't have any control over it? And if you're going to make that kind of a moral judgment about self, so I see this brain as this collection of all of these different circuits of tools. And which tools are our preference? I'm a stone carver and I have 3 tools. I probably have 20 tools, but I have 3 that are my go-to because I really like those tools. So those I use a lot, but I still have these others. So and they're different tools. How might I expand my knowingness or my abilities as a carver if I actually picked up those other tools more often and use those to do what those tools are good for? So it's not like I want to cut everything out of my brain. I value knowing that I can still get angry. I value that because it's a circuitry inside of myself. And it's really kind of fun to get angry every now and again. I mean, there's something delicious about it. There's something delicious about sadness. There's something really delicious about grief. I mean, these emotions that kind of flood in and take over, it's a part of being human. I am not ashamed of being human. And I want to be all of my humanness, but at the same time, I want to be able to pick and choose. How much time am I actually spending running each of those circuits?
That's wonderfully put. And I really appreciate it. I so like the way you put that all these experiences that we have, there's such gratitude for even anger. I mean, there's just every unique human experience is just so amazing that if we didn't trivialize it and think, well, it's just an ordinary day and I happen to be angry, if we appreciated it for the experience, the uniqueness of the experience itself, it almost becomes miraculous. It becomes this kind of amazing thing with every emotion. And so that was a wonderful way to put that even anger can be something you can be grateful for.
Absolutely. You know, this is our human ride. And if you come in and you say, okay, well, I'm born, I'm a girl, I'm in a world, it's all about me, and I have zero appreciation for what does any of that mean? What that means is, oh my gosh, a little group of molecules from my dad got together with a little group of molecules from my mom, and somehow they got together and they created a single cell. And that single cell had the genius to metamorphosize itself into this thing that I get to have as a vehicle through which I get to have an existence. And I have sensory systems that bring information in. I have a motor system that allows me to move it around. I have an intellectual processing in my cognition. I mean, this is, if we do not experience a sense of awe that we exist at all, we're really missing something critically important, because when we bring ourselves back to that pure value, then it's like, wow, this circuit will do that. And this circuit will do this. It's kind of like getting a new computer and saying, oh my gosh, they've really ramped up my phone so that my camera is like a movie camera but remember before we had anything like this. And it's like the awe of the phone. Well, where's the awe of the human? I mean, that would be, yeah, to me, it all goes back to the awe of just simply, I'm here at all. And do I want to run that anger circuitry? Do I want to run that monkey mind? Do I want to feel this way? Do I want to think those thoughts? Well, if not, then it's like, well, what power do I have using the other circuits in my brain to change the channel? And we have all kinds of ability to do that.
And just the experience of being consciousness blows me away sometimes, and you just feel like you should just go down the street screaming like I'm a conscious human being. I mean, it's such a miracle.
I know.
And yet, so we trivialize it.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm alive.
And,
you know, when I experienced that stroke, people would say to me, you know, Jill, you were a Harvard brain scientist, you were doing all these amazing things, and then boom, you were a vegetable. How did you keep smiling? And it was like, I didn't die that day. Bottom line, all this out there, I didn't die that day. It's been 25 years. I've had 25 years more of being a conscious living human being that I wouldn't have had if I'd have died that day. Now, if that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is.
Wonderful, yes. Okay, well, I have another one for you about language. So one of the things when you get into Eastern philosophy, so many of the teachers have a distrust of language. And like even the Tao Te Ching starts off with, if you can put it into words, it's not it. And whatever it is, it can't be put into words. And Krishnamurti said, if you name the bird, you'll never understand it. Yeah. And so, and again, it takes us back to this kind of antagonistic relationship between the right brain and the left brain, where the right brain seems to devalue language, and yet that's really what the left brain does. And that's, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but in a little different way, because language is really useful. We wouldn't even be able to do what we're doing right now without language. And so how do we come to see it as, and again, that useful tool? Because again, in the East, they just seem, there's so many philosophers that will say that, you know, when you name it, when you categorize it, then you lose what it really is. And so how do we bring again that balance between recognizing, yeah, the bird is a mysterious living part of nature, and it is a miracle. But I also, it can be helpful if I categorize it, and living in a world where things are organized and categorized to some degree isn't really a bad thing.
Oh, it's not a bad thing. So first of all, I love how you started this. The right brain thinks that that language is a bad thing. Right brain doesn't think that at all. It's that person's left brain making the judgment that the right brain is having this experience, and it it's in conflict. The right brain's not in any conflict. The right brain, if you and I fell off the planet right now, what is, there would be absolutely no judgment. It doesn't care. It doesn't think about if we're here or not. It simply is whatever it is. The peacefulness in the woods outside here, there's still going to be peacefulness, whether I'm here to look at it or not. It doesn't care. So let's be clear. The right brain is not making that judgment. The right brain is simply being what it is being. Now, because it's being what it is being, it's all of it. It's like the ocean is this big, vast, open thing. The universe is this big, vast, open thing. All the atoms and molecules, it's one thing. So the left brain comes in and says, the story about the elephant and the man, the blind man. So, here's this big elephant and the blind man's feeling its foot and it says, oh, that's an elephant. Or it feels its nose and it's, oh, that's an elephant. And it's like, it's impossible to get all the information about what the universe experience is if you're going to examine with the left brain and use language to define a tiny little piece of it. It's kind of like the feeling that you get when a child is born, right? When a child is born, and you're present and you're there and it's complex and it's all these emotions and all these sensational sensory experiences and fears about the future and gratifications about whatever. I mean, it's so complex. And then you say, okay, describe that in one word. How do you do that? You lose a lot, right? So the left brain, by definition, by defining, it loses a lot. It's not a bad thing. Language is not a bad thing. And I think that and I had thought about us having this conversation before because you are educated in the Eastern thought, teachers and writers and processors, and there's a level of bias in there because it's kind of like if all I have is a right brain and I'm existing completely in the present moment, then I'm a completely non-effective human being because I'm simply in the present moment. And if I'm simply in the present moment and I don't have the left brain language to communicate with another, then I'm essentially vegetative. Well, being able to tap into my vegetative nature is beautiful, because it is half of what I am as a living human. But I have to have the tools of the left brain in order to be able to come to you now and say, oh my gosh, Chris, it's like so cool when I go out on the mountain and I meditate and I'm at one with all that is. I have to have the language in order to share it. So again, it's looking at what am I as a human? And not just saying, oh, this is this and this is fantastic and this over here, it's not fantastic. No, we got to stick it together. I'm all of it. I'm a this and that. I'm not a this or that. And I need to value what I am as a whole. And to me, that is the evolution of humanity. That is the evolution when we take what we have in all parts, all quadrants, and we have them interconnecting and communicating with one another so that they're supporting. And oh my gosh, when we really are mindful of that, what our choices are, and we are consciously choosing, that's our freedom and that's our power. And that's where we need to get to, in my opinion, as humanity, because otherwise we're looking at a whole bunch of crazy stuff.
Fascinating. So can we get too caught up in the words, though? Now that's interesting because I really appreciated the way you talked about the right hemisphere, because again, the right hemisphere is fine as it is. And there's so many times with the left hemisphere. I mean, I actually wrote this down one time, like without the left hemisphere, there wouldn't be a right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is the one that categorizes and separates. The right hemisphere would just be as it is. It wouldn't call itself right. It wouldn't be, in opposition. But can we get too caught up in language? Or is it that when we get too caught up in language, is that again the left brain making that judgment saying we're too caught up in language?
Well, no, I think if we are too caught up in language, which I do believe our society is at this point, because we are skewed to the values of the language. Well, I don't want to be skewed to the values of the left brain. I don't want to be skewed to talking about everything. If I'm walking on a beach hand in hand with someone I love, I want to be in the present with them. Language pulls it out of the present into the analysis of the present. I don't want to be analyzing the present. I want to be connected to all that is, including this person I adore. I want to be able to walk silently in that space and share the present. I don't need words for that. And for me, words pull away from that. So I'm really aware of who I spend time with. I mean, I live on a boat 6 months out of the year, and I have very rigid rules. When you come into my boat, you're coming into the cove, and you're coming into the silence of the cove. And we're dropping the phones, and we're dropping the technology, and we're pushing out all that stuff that's out in that left brain world. You can return to it anytime that you want, but this is a sacred space. It's like if you're going to go into an ashram, we're not just chatty, whatever. We're seeking space between those words because we're just regurgitating over and over that cellular circuitry of that left brain. Analysis. Is it a bad thing? No. Out of balance? Yes. I want all of it, but I want it all in balance.
Okay, I have questions here on individuality, and the thing I really liked about your book is talking about the hero's journey, and that for me has always been a wonderful myth, and it's archetypal. It seems to get really deep into the human condition, but of course in the East they talk about the self as an illusion, and so I'm wondering how we can work that out. Where in the East there's this no self, that the self is just an idea. It's nothing literal, and there's no stability to it. And like one of the simplest definitions of Buddhism is that everything changes. And so if everything's fluid and changing, there can't be this kind of stable self, and that's an illusion created by the left brain. But at the same time, it really connected with me, and I think a lot of people, when we talk about the hero's adventure, and we talk about this journey, this passage from being part of the collective to being an individual. And so how can we reconcile that? I mean, what is it that's becoming an individual if it's not a self?
Well, I think that, so take the consciousness of the right brain. And is the consciousness of the right brain the true self? Because it is whatever it is, whether I'm here or not. Again, that part of my consciousness that has the ability that I call the right thinking tissue, that ability to be connected to all that is in the acceptance of what is. And I think in the Eastern philosophies, that it becomes the part of me that is true, because that is whether I'm busy with my left brain or not, right? That's kind of the piece of me that I would dissolve back into. So it is this overall awareness. Now, if air were not clear and air had a tint to it, so that I could see maybe a little smokiness, so that I could actually see that the space between us is atoms and molecules. And if I go like this enough, then where you are miles and miles away, if you could focus on those molecules of me going like this, Indiana, you would be able to eventually see, that's because Jill was over there blowing a fan on all this stuff. Oh, we are all interconnected. So at that level of consciousness, as a human, we have the ability to have an awareness that we are connected like that. And then we have this beautiful left brain that comes online and says, yes, but I am an individual, and I also am part of self. I am Jill. I like these colors. I live here. These are my data. So again, it's like, It's like, how do we, as a collective whole, at this stage of humanity and the evolution of humanity, take where our ancestors in the East have been to know we are that or we are this. And it's kind of more of a that we are this or we are that. And we want to be this because this is real. And that self, part of ourselves, is an illusion because it can change. Well, yeah, if I have a stroke and I wipe out my left brain, I'm going to be very different in the me, the self, but there's still a part of me that is the same. And what part is that? That's the part of me that is not of me, the individual, of the self, defined as I define with that left brain. Instead, I shift into that part of me that just is connected to all that is. So I think we are maturing. I think we are, we have these beautiful Eastern philosophies and philosophers have used beautiful words in order to describe a part of who we are. And to them, that is the real part. Okay. To me, that is the consciousness of the right brain. They have done beautiful ability to out in the field beyond what is right and what is wrong. I will meet you there. Well, what is right and what is wrong is that left brain definition. So I can go there. I can connect my consciousness of my heart and my love to you wherever you are in the world, because there's no boundaries of me and the right and the wrong and the good and the bad that the left brain brings. But that's not being fully human either. We have to have all of it. Being fully human to me as a neuroanatomist means I take all of it. Now, do I like all of it as much as other pieces of it? Well, I'll tell you, what is today? Today, that you might care that I don't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Today is January 6th. So it's the anniversary of the insurrection. There are people in schools, parents who are raging at teachers and teachers quitting today because the parents are saying, you will not mention the word insurrection. Okay, so that's interesting, isn't it? We have an experience in the world that we all witnessed, that we have put a name on, insurrection, and some people want us to deny the word insurrection and deny the experience that we all experienced a year ago. And so our humanitarian, what part of their brain are they caught up in? And what part of the brain are the teachers in? And what part of the brain are we in as humanity as we watch ourselves look at these different pieces of ourselves that are like little bombs that we're all blowing? And what will happen when it all becomes a whole brain? What are we evolving into? And if we have to look at it and see it and name it, okay, then we can perhaps manage it differently. And isn't that where we are as a society? We're managing all these different separate pieces as a this or that. And what it really needs to become is an and. We are one brain. I am one brain with all these different skill sets, all these amazing abilities. We all have it. But as a society, if we're going to evolve, then certain groups of cells need to be loved so that they're not in so much pain, screaming so loudly that we can't build something that is peaceful and sane, that will perpetuate the human species.
So the hero's adventure, it's not about the ego taking a ride and developing. It's more about the totality of all of the different brain modules. And that's the hero's adventure, getting them all to realize their part, the role they're playing in the totality of our human existence.
Yes, and when you actually look and break down the journey, the hero's journey, what's the first thing that happens? He has a calling. He has a calling to discover something new, which means in order for me to go on the adventure, I leave behind what I know and what I can control. That's the left brain. So I'm willing to step out of the consciousness of the left brain, but I have all these fears because I'm going to run into the dragons and I'm going to run into the monsters and I'm going to run into all the character 2 emotions. I'm going to have my sadness and my fear and my anxiety and my rage and everything, every weakness I ever knew about myself. Those are my monsters. So I have to be willing to set down the monsters that are saying, oh no, you can't set down my ego. If you set down me, then I die. And it's like, don't worry, little character 2. You're right here. We can pick you up in an instant. It's okay. You're not going to die. But we're going to set you down and we're going to explore with curiosity. So instead of the focus on me, the individual, face those monsters, say, you're right here. The monsters are real. That's fine. But I'm still going to go on this adventure and I'm going to cross that field. And so then I jump into the consciousness of the present moment. I go on the adventure. I find my way into the anima animus, which is the androgynous me. The androgynous me is a very different me than me, the woman, or me, the man, and all my definition. So it opens me up to me as a living entity. And from that character 3, the ultimate goal is to find peace. I find my jewel. I find my connection. I find my expansiveness. I find my no stress. I find my emotional peace. I find in the present, I don't have the anxiety. I don't have the fears of my past. I don't have the pain from my past. I'm simply here. This is the gift. Oh my God, it's real. And I can find that peace. I can bring myself so out of me. I find my peace. And then it's like, okay, well then here I am. I'm in my peace. Well, I'm not a microbe. I'm a human. I want to come back and share it with other people because I want to save humanity. I want us to all save humanity. I want us to all gain this peace so that we're not creating more bombs and creating more war and creating more hostilities and rooting in the monsters of our character 2. Don't name it. Don't name it. Don't name it. If it's named, I have to face it. It might be real. Oh my God. Pain. So I bring back my peace to love my pain. I come back now peaceful. And the last step of the hero's journey is the decision of, do I actually open my mouth and share with others about my journey, which makes me a unicorn instead of a horse, right? Now everybody's looking at me like I'm weird because I went on this journey and I came back, and some people look at me and say, oh yeah, she's a unicorn. That's fantastic. I want some of that. Or there are other people who are saying, oh my God, she's a unicorn. She's cursed and it's horrible. But it's my journey, and I have to be compelled to do with that what I will. And I may choose to share it, I may choose to not share, but that is what's going on at the level of the brain. And so I come back, and so that's what happened with me with the stroke. I lost the left brain, my monsters got destroyed. I went off, I found my peace, and then it's like, well, I can exist here for decades because physically I was in good shape, and I can be in this vegetative, very peaceful, wonderful place forever. Or, one day I'm actually going to die, and that'll be eternity. And that should probably feel pretty much like this too. So what do? Do I try to recover? I had no left hemisphere that was functioning. And in order to have a thought or an emotion, I had to have neurons running in circuits. So it's like, okay, well, I had those experiences. Do I try? And I tried. And it took 8 years then for me to build enough of that circuitry back that I could have language again. I could have the emotions again. I could feel everything again. And then what do I do with that? And I don't want to lose what I gained. I want to be a whole brain. And I think that's where we're going as humanity. The race is on.
Okay, well, there's one here that's a couple things you said led it to this next question, and it's something that seems to be such a clear difference in perspective between Western culture and Eastern philosophy, and that is the relationship with the body. And so in the West, it's so common to identify with our body. As you were saying, it's, do I identify as a male, and you as a female? But there's another process of identification that seems to be beyond gender, beyond, the physicality of the body. And the East just comes right out and says this over and over again with different teachers, whether it's Ramana Maharshi, he does over and over again, I'm not the body, I am not the body. Or Ram Dass has a couple of wonderful quotes where I want to treat this vehicle well while I'm here, but it has nothing to do with who I am truly. But here in the West, we really do tend to identify with the body. And so is there something going on with a difference in perspective between the left and right sides of the brain? Is the left side more likely to identify with the body? And then these other more transcendent experiences seem to be the recognition that this body isn't really who I am?
Well, go right back to what are the fundamental differences between the right brain and the left brain? And if the left brain is about me, the individual, and it's about judgment and it's about defining things, the left brain's going to come in and say, well, I have a stomach and it has 3 parts, and these are the names of it, and these are what kind of cells are in there, and this is what they do. And it's going to break the body down into every tissue type there absolutely is, and then piece it together into a body. But it's really looking at the parts. It's not looking at the whole. Well, the right brain, it doesn't think like that. It isn't analyzing. I mean, I was a gross anatomist before the stroke, and I could have sculpted for you an abdomen because I had had my hands in dozens and dozens of abdomen, but I could not have named for you the different parts of a stomach because the right brain is experiential. It's in the present moment. My body I'm not separate from my pinky. I am my pinky. I am my toes. I am cells. I'm like a big cell. I'm like one thing to the right hemisphere, and it communicates with that right hemisphere in the present moment. Health is something that is in the present moment. Health is not in the past. It's not in the future. My relationship with my experience of the present moment. If I go out and at night and I'm walking my dog and I get this sense that I'm not alone, that is a present moment relation, not just of me in this box, but me in relationship to the energetics coming in through my sensory systems into my awareness. So the relationship, I am not my body. I'm not there. First of all, there's no separation of cells between my brain and my body. I am just one thing. And then the left brain comes in and says, okay, well, I'm a brain and I'm a body, and they're separate. And so if we have problems with one, we're going to treat that instead of treat the health and wellness of the whole. And that is one of the biggest differences between Eastern medicine and Western medicine. Is Eastern medicine is based on the wellness of the whole. And if you have a problem with a certain groups of cells, you don't focus on that problem group of cells. You practice, you heal the overall, so that and trust that the immune system and what I am biologically is already designed to heal whatever's going on there. Now, there's no, and then the Western medicine is the disease. We're going to focus on the illness. We're going to separate it out. We're going to have all these different doctors who do all these different things when we know we're one big collective whole. So again, when it comes to our relationship through both Eastern and Western and looking at the body and our relationship with the body, it's a natural breakdown on the lines of, well, I don't end right here. I know energetically. And oh my gosh, the mere word energy to Western medicine is taboo. You know, when I was coming up at Harvard, the 2 things we could not talk about was consciousness. We could not talk about consciousness. And if you had it in a paper, your whole career was dead. And the other thing that was taboo was energy. Well, how is it we can't talk that we are energetic beings when we actually know that we are? Right. And so if we're going to chop out the fact that we have an energy field, we influence that energy field, that energy fields of others can influence us, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle of what am I? Am I a body? I have a body. My body's not separate from the consciousness of my brain, but the cells in my brain can separate me as the individual away from that consciousness of my right hemisphere, which is in fluid communication with my body.
And the communication with the environment. It's so easy to forget that this whole time I've been breathing, and there's this continuous exchange of energy between everything around me and the food that we consume. I mean, it all becomes me. And so there's easy.
And you become it.
And become it. And
how you focus those cells in your brain, you become angry, you influence the environment with that anger. You become different chemistry inside of your body. You exude different wavelengths. You influence what's around you. I mean, we're there's no separation. We're symbiotic with everything, but not to Western medicine. Now, that's not to say anything bad about Western medicine. Thank goodness that we have a scientific method that we can use in order to learn more about that. But let's be real clear on what its limitations are and value it for what it is. And Lord knows if I have an accident, I'm going straight to the ER because I want it fixed now. And that's, nothing better than Western medicine for that.
I agree. Me too. I'll go to the ER, break a leg. I mean, the ER
But
is
it's
the
the
place to go.
combination. It's really, then how do I use the energy of my brain to help heal, to help strengthen and empower that which is strong inside of me to recover my overall wellness.
So one of the things, again, that stands out so much with Eastern philosophy is particularly the non-dualism aspect. And it's interesting, you were talking about consciousness because we've changed so much. And I even saw that in grad school. The term consciousness was very taboo in the 90s even, which was strange because it was starting to make its way into becoming more popular. But the last consciousness conference I was at, the biggest debate was between the non-dualist and people from a more Western tradition. And the interesting thing when you start reading about non-dualism is the way they talk about this world as a dream. And they say that, well, this is all a dream and there's a deeper reality. And so maybe this is when it gets a little strange, but in some ways it isn't, because a lot of the world, if you ask them, they do believe in some type of afterlife, something beyond this reality. So is that something that the right hemisphere is sort of conjuring up, or is there really something beyond this world?
Can you define dualism and non-dualism just so we have that?
Yeah. So dualism is the most obvious in terms of just how it feels. Like right now, it feels like I'm here, you're there. I don't feel like I'm part of the computer. I feel like me. I feel like I'm in this body. I'm separate, disconnected, and I'm this ego, and I'm somewhere maybe behind the eyes, between the ears, controlling things. And I'm separate, and that's the most basic idea of dualism fits because it's the way it seems to be. But then non-dualism, which is mostly from Advaita Vedanta in Eastern philosophy, is this notion that that's all an illusion, that the whole world is a completely interconnected process, and that this sense of me is more, even the material stuff around me is more like a dream world. And beyond that dream world exists maybe cosmic consciousness. They have a bunch of different terms for it, but it's just it's the fundamental reality that is expressing itself. They use the term Maya, meaning illusion. And so all this stuff here, it only seems real. But the point is that in non-dualism, there's a deeper reality to what we experience on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just curious what your take on that is.
I think I'm looking for my model of the brain. I mean, the brain's divided into two hemispheres. Those two hemispheres process information completely separately, completely differently from one another. And if the right brain comes in and says, I'm connected to all that is, I am connected to all that is fundamentally, but what fun is that as a living being? I mean, think about it. If we look at life, what is life? What is the meaning of life? Okay, Chris, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life is to take the interconnected oneness and adventure out, kind of like a drop of water adventures away from the ocean for a little bit, and then at some point come home, but have a really adventurous time and have every moment to be a suspenseful, fascinating surprise that it is just filled with so many experiences that when you go back into the ocean, you've got so much that you could never have experienced as the ocean.
So if the ocean is the consciousness of the universe, and the consciousness of the universe is existing for eternity, can't you imagine that it would want to create different ways of experiencing itself? Because otherwise it could just like be bored to death.
Yes.
I mean, so what if the consciousness of the universe is intelligent? And to me, clearly, to be able to take molecules and to create order out of chaos and order out of chaos to the level of human life, there is a tendency toward intelligence. If I had to argue it, I probably could. So if that's the case, then to me, the meaning of life I describe as taking the assumption that you had too. I'm a part of the ocean, and a little drop comes out and goes on adventures. To me, the meaning of life is to stimulate and be stimulated by, because the only thing that a single-celled organism, a microbe, has is a fine semi-permeable membrane where it takes part of the ocean and separates itself from being the overall ocean. And it has little receptors stippling on that semi-permeable membrane so that it can detect, be stimulated by hydrogen or photon light or whatever. And then based on how it receives that information, it responds, and then it acts in a certain way. And to me, it's kind of exactly what you said, to stimulate or be stimulated by. So you're this little drop that's out having this great adventure and having stimulation and having possibility and doing whatever you're doing. And then when, you know, the biological is over, you go back into being in the consciousness of the ocean. That works for me. So where's the right or wrong? Where's the good or the bad? You know, if the real self, the true self, the authentic self, the real experience is that consciousness beyond this, why judge this as anything bad? Why say reality is not real? Why why make who? First of all, I always find it fascinating that there is so much consternation appearing between the ocean, the consciousness of the ocean. I don't think the consciousness of the ocean or the universe is coming in and saying, you know, this experience is not real. It is real. It is real to the living being that is designed to experience it. Does it matter? In 100 years, no one's going to know who I was. Does it matter? My existence. I mean, I learned a lot when both of my parents died in 2015. And when I realized that these enormous people, their worlds, their lives were now reduced to their stuff because they're not here anymore. And then we go through their stuff, and I have a space or a drawer or a closet of my mother's clothing that I can still go in and smell the scent of her. When a life can be reduced to the stuff that we touched, wow, to me, was it real? For me, as a biological, clearly, I feel that connection. But when I'm gone and anybody who knew them are gone, are they gone? Or is the part of them that came from the ocean still an energetic existence that may refuel different pieces of other life? To me, it's the great mystery, and I don't need to define it as something other than that. What is real? Does it matter? Is it an illusion? Well, not to the biological. At what point does Eastern come in and respect the biological and respect both, making an and? And I think that you know, we have evolved as a human. Eastern didn't come in and get it all right because they didn't come in and embrace the left. that philosophy, many of those philosophies, it's like, I'm going to say negative things about this place being real or being an illusion or being this, that, or the other, but make that judgment of separation and honor this right piece of it that is what is real and what is true and what really matters. Well, if that's all that really matters, why are we even alive having the conversation? So we end up with a this and a that, or a this and a that, but it's like, come on, it's time. This is the time to put it all together. We have gone that extreme. We have gone this extreme. Let's put it all together and have a this and a that, and really wake up to the consciousness of what are we as all of it.
And do you think that working out the dynamics and the relationships between these different brain modules, is that the key, like, for us to get along? Like,
I think to me, that's the best gift that I could give to the world. And based on what I believe, what I believed before the stroke, what I am as a living being, what I became after the stroke, what I learned in the process of rebuilding the left brain. How do I be a whole brain? How do I be completely conscious human being? Am I going to get it right 100% of the time? No, I'm a bunch of cells. And that little character 2 of my left brain is going to come in and it's going to throw a little tizzy fit every now and again because it didn't get its way and it didn't get what and I'm not working with what is. And as long as I'm not good with what is, which is the consciousness of the right brain, then my left brain is going to say, well, I'm discontent with that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to nag about it, or I'm going to come in, I'm going to rationalize it. I'm going to try to fix it, or I'm going to make something else that will fix that, but I'm going to make it different. I'm all of this. I'm all of it. What part of me do I really want to exude into the world? And by knowing all of these different modules inside of myself, and the fact that I can have relationships, healthy relationships between them, and then I can capitalize on my character 1, and I can nurture and love my character 2, and I can nurture and be loving with my character 3, and my character 4 is just along for the ride, feeling like, wow, right now I'm a drop. How exciting is that? I'm still connected to the ocean, but right now I'm a drop. Whatever is, and it's all good. When I know that and I work with that, this is what I have to work with. This is me. And to me, whole brain living allows us tools to figure out how to get all of them intercommunicating with one another so that I can live the life I want to live. Now, I might decide I want to be a monster bitch in the world. And so that part of me is what I'm going to exude into the world. I can decide I want to be an intellectual, left brain thinking, all that in the world. I can do that. And if I want to skew towards that because I value money over other things, then I can be that in an instant. Or I can really just sit back and say, I'm just so happy that I've had 25 years being a biological creature. And I just want to sit back and see if I can find peace in my own life so that I can go do things that I think are fun, like walk in the woods or talk to you on the computer or go do whatever I want to do and just bring that energy into the world. But at least I'm making conscious decisions. I'm not just running on automatic. And to me, that's the power of whole brain living, is we can become completely conscious about our possibilities. I can't be conscious if I don't know what my possibilities are. I can't choose or make better choices if I don't know what my choices are. And whole brain living says, here we are. This is the buffet. Eat what you want, be what you want, do what you want, and then you're gone. And who's going to remember in 100 years? And did it matter? And the only thing that mattered is, how am I in the present moment? And do I want to run my anxiety circuit and my frustration or my sadness or my get lost in all of the external? Or do I want to be balanced and find that real deep inner peace from inside and exude that into my life because I like that better?
Yeah. And, all Buddhism means is to be awake and to be conscious. And when you're conscious, then you have the capacity to make decisions. And, that's a life worth living, because like you said, going on autopilot, which maybe that's a decision for some people to just sort of go through the whole motions. But I find it far more adventurous to take the totality in and feel the almost like a democracy in the brain going on. And I think once, we get that figured out on an individual level, I think you put it so well. I think that there'll be a harmony that will happen with humans, and this will naturally happen once we figure out our own dynamics in the skull.
Yeah,
So,
I think and right now we're just playing out the worst of the worst, and it's in our faces, and we're very skewed. We're polarized politically. We're polarized at the grocery store. We're managing a virus. We're managing fear. The polarity that brings to us on top of it. It's just, right now we just got underneath the microscope all of our different parts, and it's like, who do I want to be? And do I have the ability to choose? And I do have the ability to choose. And teaching children that they have the ability to choose, to me, that's power. If we grew up in a world where we really knew what our choices were, and that we had the power to make those choices under a lot of situations, at least what's going on internally, we'd have a different world. So I trust we will have a different world in 20 or 30 years.
yeah, one of my favorite quotes from William James was that my first act of free will be to believe in free will. And so you can't make a conscious choice if you don't believe in conscious choices.
Right.
So we have to, take that as maybe that first step, and it all comes together with recognizing the different brain modules and not over-identifying with one, and then coming together with that relationship between them. And so, and I think you're right. I think we're at a really interesting time, and I think there's some interesting possibilities for our species, and to overcome the programming of our past, these modules that were based for a very different environment where, you could easily have been eaten if you didn't focus and pay attention and categorize and process information in a certain way. But that's so distant. We're living in a completely different reality right now. And so we need an upgrade, kind of a neurological upgrade in all the software. And
Right.
so maybe this upgrade is that awareness of the different brain modules and recognizing the relationships between them.
I think that's a great first step. And, as I look at my lifetime, going from in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you bring up energy, you bring up consciousness, it's taboo. But, we've had some pioneers in the last 30 years, 40 years, who were willing to have these conversations and bring it more mainstream. And that has grown the population of people who are actually open to thinking about their thinking. You teach at college. When I taught at college, it was like, I would go in and I would say, I would talk about the present moment and thinking about thinking. And my college kids, it was the college age group that said, I don't want to think about what I'm thinking, Dr. Taylor. And it's like, I get that.
Yeah.
And then kind of until you're, there's this big block of the teenage brain between maybe 12 and 25, where it's like it is so overwhelming, shifting in circuitry during that period of time. It's like I don't have time to think about what I'm thinking. I'm just being, I'm just hanging on for the ride. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a personal choice. Yeah, but I agree with you. I think that, again, also what we focus on grows. And when you look at the news, and the news is all focused on all of the negative and the separation, who's shining the light on those of us who are actually waking up and being aware? And how do we, and I think that this is, apps are helping with, if I want more mindfulness in my life, I can have an app that helps bring me to the present moment or whatever. But nobody is really uniting those of us who are shining a big old bright light saying humanity's beautiful. Are we a little out of control? Yeah, but humanity is beautiful. Let's fuel that energetically. And I think that that's going to be the next step. And I'm excited about that because I think we're everywhere, and I think we're in every house, and I think we're just not connected at that level, but our disconnect and separateness has been really put under the on the TV, which is booming into everybody's worlds.
Just one last question for you. It's kind of obvious when we're in left brain processing mode because we have the voice in the head and we're making judgments. Does the right brain have any voice? And it's obviously not linguistic, but what kind of language does the right hemisphere express itself with, or maybe it doesn't at all?
Oh, well, as far as words and language, or as far as communicating with us?
Just how does the right brain, so the left brain expresses itself with language, and that just is so obvious for us to connect. So I know, like right now, we're in a degree of left brain mode, but how do I know when, if the right brain doesn't have access to language, if it's not expressing itself with words, how do I know it's expressing itself? How do I know when to listen?
Well, I personally, to the right brain, everything is connected. It's atoms and molecules in space. It's the consciousness of all that is. It's the ocean versus the drop. It's the universe versus the me, the individual, with cells separate from experiencing. But do I perceive relationship from the external world? Well, if all of a sudden I start noticing, and I hate to even use the words because the left brain goes, synchronicities, consequences, predictable flows, coincidences. I mean, it's like, the left brain is so adverse to the possibility that I am being communicated with, that it's going to make this harsh judgment that says, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. Well, I keep finding, these things keep happening. It's like, oh, it's just a coincidence. Well, it's not a coincidence if I'm actually bigger than this, right? Synchronicities are real if I am the ocean. If something happens on one side of the ocean and the ripple effect happens through all those molecules of water, it influences the other side. It's not a coincidence. So it's in looking at this brain and saying, okay, how do I be open to possibility of the other? How do I merely be open to possibility of the other?
Wow.
As soon as that happens, I become all of it.
Yeah, the notion of synchronicities, I think that's a wonderful way to talk about noticing the right brain's processing. And also the left brain steps in and maybe becomes a skeptic again. But synchronicities always are a reflection
monster. It becomes a monster. I'm not on my hero's journey. I'm not okay with being connected to all that is. And that synchronicity becomes a monster. Because if synchronicities are real, I don't matter so much.
Yeah.
And to the left brain, all that matters is itself.
Ego, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
we
for sharing.
finally used the word. We finally named it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. This was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you. You're very enlightening, and I think you've made some great points that Eastern philosophy, sometimes people adopt it like it has all the answers, and like
it's a religion. They left brain the right brain experience.
Yeah.
And if you just look at many of the Eastern philosophies, there isn't the judgment there. There becomes then my analysis of that philosophy, and I then make that judgment and saying this enlightened person said this, and so that means that, and then whose judgment actually was it? But there isn't, there's judgment, right, wrong, good, bad, this, that, and there's simply what is. They're both. As a human, how do we stop making that this or that, stop pushing away that which is different and start uniting that which I can learn from, because now I am that drop having the adventure of life.
And not to get too caught up in the pointers. The pointer is just showing you a direction, and it's kind of, where is the path going? And it's all too easy to get caught up in that, and the details of the pointer and arguing about these pointers when that's all they are. They're just little breadcrumbs that we've maybe left ourselves to find our way home. And so you get caught up in that. But thanks. This is a wonderful discussion as always. Beautiful. And I appreciate your time. And
thank you, Chris. It's good to see you again. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation. I look forward to the next one.
Thanks. Me too. Okay, I'm gonna